Okay. And please, when you come to speak, you can state your gender pronouns and your POI preferences. But without further ado, I would like to invite the Prime Minister to start this debate. Hear, hear.
Give me 1 second to set up everything. I think we're going to be fine. All right. When the Berlin Wall fell in 1989, my grandmother moved from Yambol, Bulgaria to Germany to enable a better life for my father outside of a state that had failed them of opportunities and deprived them of the chance to have an education prior. Despite living on the street for most of his teenage years, my father went on to get an education, graduated university, and was able to raise a family where the children are free to do fun activities like debate, far from the communist state in which he had grown up. Two claims coming out of opening government. Firstly, how this benefits workers and their families, even benefits the state at home more than the potential detriment of brain drain. Secondly, how we have no obligation to the state, which fails them of opportunities, which is why brain drain at opposition's best is irrelevant. We think the right of parents is more important and the duty to care about their children than the duty to have like some communal obligation to an arbitrary state, which fails them of opportunities. So firstly, on the benefits for families. I think there's a critical question that we have to ask ourselves at the get-go of this debate is when does this migration model work and when does it happen? I think this happens as a means of last resort. That is to say, you realize that the chances of progress are actually low and are only then willing to take the risk to move to another country where you don't know the language, where you don't know the customs. This usually happens in states where you don't see a future for your children, where things are moving down really, really fast, and where you feel the necessity to take the risk of migration. So let's look at the actual mechanism of how we benefit the families on our side of the house. I think this is likely going to look like as these people work in blue-collar jobs, they earn higher wages than they would have at home. The reason that exploitation is unlikely is because of the trends in recent times. That is to say, you have a rise in minimum wage laws and a rise in labor protection laws. That is to say, regardless of where you live, due to the structure of the internet and to the faster flow of information, where the whole country is connected to the things that happen within this country, where newspapers can cover every single corner of the country, and where more and more companies are forced to publish reports of how they treat their workers, of ESG standards, of compliance with these standards that governments implement. We think even in the worst examples for outside of the house, even in states like Qatar, we think the trend is towards the better with international scrutiny and with scrutiny structurally incentivized that forces them to legitimize themselves, because every government needs to legitimize themselves in the eyes of the people. We don't think that like needless exploitation is going to happen. And even if I'm unsure how this is comparative to the exploitation that they suffer at home, given our characterization as to when they would migrate, this leads to one of two things. Firstly, this allows the people of the families of the workers to migrate as well, in which case you enable them to have a better education. Probably most of the parts of the world where this model actually applies is states like Canada, is states like the US. Don't let them drag you down on examples that actually are very unlikely. The most likely examples are liberal democracies, where you have an access to education and where it is within the merit of children to climb the ladder. We think even if there's like some structural issues for them, this is still better on the comparative. So the reason this is good is because obviously this means that you as a parent fulfill your duty towards your child. But secondly, this allows for the partial migration of a family, or even you're able to send remittances home. That is to say, even if you send remittances home and your family cannot migrate, this leads to massive benefits for the countries at home, which even outweighs brain drain. Why? Because there's currently 7 million Indian workers in the Arab world who send home billions of remittances every year, which then flows back into the Indian economy. Would these workers have stayed at home, they would have never been able to be educated and to actually make this amount of money. This becomes especially crucial in the second generation or later on. We think this is relevant given that the benefits of the remittances that are flowing home likely outweigh any brain drain that you could accept. Even if there's going to be brain drain, we think in the long term, this is the states will recognize this and will be forced to change from the inside. That is to say, they have to offer better education. They have to do something against this. We think the most likely thing is that they don't turn into North Korea and shut down their borders and force everyone to stay inside. We think most likely they will have to adopt some mechanisms, because not like states are not inherently authoritarian. Even India has incentives to improve the education. Even if these parents then don't see their children outside, they're still going to be satisfied when they know they can send remittances and money home, can support their families, which is still better for them than any alternative. Before I move on as to how we don't have an obligation to the state, I'm very happy to take a POI from closing.
Yes, you're talking about this as if you're just going to be making a lot of money. You never prove why this is actually the case.
The reason they make money is because they're working in a job, often in these countries which they likely seek out. That is to say, if you migrate, you likely migrate into countries where there's a very high chance of migration. That is to say, when you migrate into the European Union, which is very accessible, you just have to cross one border or a few borders, and then you can migrate into every single one of these countries. The reason that they are likely going to be welcomed is because there's currently a lack of labor, and there's also a lack of skilled labor in the long term, which is and the demographic change as well. All of these reasons means that governments, especially in the long term, will need to be incentivized to be more open, maybe than they are right now, towards migration. I think furthermore, let's talk about the duty to the state and why we do not have one. And this is very easy to prove, right? The state has a monopoly of violence. This is the state contract principle, and in exchange for this monopoly, it offers you certain benefits. That is to say, you get the opportunity to educate, and you get the opportunity to live out your agency with the minimal restriction of freedom. Depriving someone of the choices that they have and that they have a right to, we think education is a basic human right. Depriving one of the choices also means a constraint in this freedom. We think this is illegitimate in any sense. That is to say, if a state doesn't reward you with the things that it should reward you with according to the state contract principle, this is illegitimate. We don't have an obligation to the state. Supporting this model in principle means that it's fine for these workers to leave. We think supporting the principle of states needing to provide for the citizens living within it is a solid principle in and of itself. It's more important than any duties that we have to the community. For all of these reasons, and because we think it is necessary for you to make sure that your children are going to be better off in the long term, we think you have the right to do so, and we see the benefits right now. Very proud to propose this motion.
All right, I want to thank the Prime Minister for a very fine speech, and to open opposition side, happy to call the leader of opposition. Hear, hear.
First of all, am I audible and visible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you. Quick thanks to Jessica. This has been a very fun and entertaining experience with you, and my deepest admiration for you. And hello also to Juanita, who is watching us and giving us inspiration. Let me just set up my timer. Okay, put in the POI like that. I'm going to try to prioritize, but because I have the camera, I have difficulties managing the time. So yeah, just give me a second. If possible, like raise your hand, but also put it in the chat. Okay, I'll start in 3, 2, 1. Panel, I think that there is a large mirage in the majority of developing countries. There is an illusion that if you go to a particular place, whether it be Europe, whether it be like the United States, you are going to have way better opportunities that you end up having. And what this has caused in the contemporary world is for middle-class Latin Americans to go to the United States and to have to assume way worse conditions than what they actually had in their particular countries, because they consider that in the long run, they are going to be able to have like a better quality of life. This looks like, for instance, Central African people that have a middle-class lifestyle having to assume dirt poor conditions in a country that has the rise of like right-wing populism that is explicitly anti-migrant. We believe that people first have better like chances for social ascension within their own particular countries, and secondly, they end up assuming like terrible conditions in order to do this migration. We don't support this particular model. First of all, I would like to point out that we're not talking about like desperate situations such as like refugees or extremely poor people for different reasons. Firstly, because like these individuals are in order for them to actually have like the capacity to work to a certain extent, they need to have like certain tools in order to like be accepted into these places. Otherwise, they get deported as illegal immigrants, or they don't have like the capacity to have like these blue collar works because they don't meet with like the specific requirements that it's made. This means that in the majority of cases, the people are people that can actually afford to travel into these spaces, which tend to be part of the middle class. Why is the middle class better off within these particular countries? And I want to make some clarifications as to how the developing world looks right now. First of all, there is a larger degree of growth because of globalization. Understand that like more and more like developing countries are like developed countries require the raw resources within these developing countries, which means that every time that there is like a huge crisis, such as like what is happening in Ukraine, they sink in a lot of money to like diversify the chains of production within these spaces, because that is the way in which like they are able to sustain themselves. Secondly, because understand that being middle class within these spaces means that you can have like the capacity to, sure, not like a high degree a university education, but certain technical educations, which already puts you in a particular social position within these spaces. Sure, you cannot be CEO, but you can, for instance, have some degree of disposable income that you are able to have within like your own particular households. But secondly, understand that first, because there has been like an increase of like anti-migrant sentiments within like the West and all of these spaces, there has actually been lots of investments within programs for people to stay in those particular areas. This means that one, you do have things such as like state funding for education, but secondly, because these states are particularly growing and you have like a larger amounts of population, the capacities for you to have employment or education are actually rising. They perhaps might not be the best, but they're sufficiently enough. But thirdly, even if education is not the best, like in these spaces, education is not necessarily required for the majority of jobs that you are able to gain, because there is a presumption that the majority of people don't actually have like that degree of education. This means that you can do things such as like open a small business or like create like particular sources of income that are sufficient enough for you to continue in that regard. Why then is this absolutely worst when one particular individual goes into these spaces? First, I would like to point out that there are certain degrees that even if you migrate legally, you are not able to continue. First of all, you are not a citizen, and therefore you do not have citizenship rights. Those like labor laws that opening government can have tend to be very ephemeral within like different types of governments, but you have absolutely no control over whether or not they are going to remain the same. And no, I think that the rise of right-wing populism has actually had the tendency to remove these particular things, not put them, and you have absolutely no control. But second, the labor conditions that you are assumed tend to be even worse in these particular places for different reasons. First of all, because there is overt discrimination towards these people. First, because it is unlikely that you are able to adapt, learn the language, or do those things at least in the short term, and therefore you are less likely to be looked up. But secondly, because individuals have internal bias towards like their own particular things. That is to say that your boss is more likely to look you down into these spaces, which means that the amount of your money that you get or the capacity for you to have a raise or stuff of that nature gets worse. But thirdly, because unions and these particular places tend to favor the local population for different reasons. One, because they have been historically members within these spaces, but two, because they are usually very resented towards migrants because there is a narrative that they are taking their jobs. That is to say that you get absolutely fucked by the system because of like these particular like elements that you end up having. That means that you end up like assuming terrible conditions within these spaces. Before I explain why is it very unlikely that you get sufficient income to help, CG, do you have a point?
Yes. Why would I leave my family, everyone I love, and go into a country to be a stranger if I can have a normal life in my home country?
Very simple, because there is one thing called the American dream, which tells you that in the future you are able to become a huge business owner, that you are able to become like increasingly successful. This is sufficiently enough for people to actually go into these spaces in order to do so. Thirdly, why is it very unlikely that you actually get the quality education that you have been promised? Two different reasons. First of all, understand that in the Western world, the prices of education are skyrocketing because like the financial system has had like things such as like student loan schemes or something like that, which means that like the prices for college tuitions are actually going up. That is to say that even locals are having difficulty having access to education. It becomes even more difficult for you as a foreigner to be able to get into these places. But secondly, because understand that the travels or costs within these spaces also end up becoming bigger. You might end up like having the money right now, but that like the prices of living keep skyrocketing within these particular places. Thirdly, internal discrimination. You as a migrant have other expectations that you have to follow. That is to say that one, if the education in your country is not as good as you were expected, you are expected to overachieve in order for the to compensate those particular things. That is to say that it is very difficult for you to meet these expectations because of you're fucked. Thank you.
All right, I want to thank Leader of Opposition for a great speech, and to continue government side, happy to call DPM. Here, here.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, good. Before starting, just because he's watching, thank you to Juanjo for being the best teacher and friend and for always supporting me. Now, it is very important to pay attention when Kieran explains that this is only an option that you go to as a last resource. Naturally, people don't like to abandon their families. They don't like to leave the places they grew up to, especially for opportunities that don't look attractive, just like taking on these kind of jobs. Now, usually where this is happening is states where there's very low chances of evolving, or there's no foreseeable progress or better future. Otherwise, these people would stay just for the sake of hope, because when you've got your family, when you've got your background back home, you have no chances to move if you have any sort of promise of progress. Now, when this happens and you actually look up to even go to a state where you're not guaranteed that you'll have a great life, you just promise to have a decent life, it's because there's no foreseeable progress. Especially this happens in developing countries where no longer is the progress not foreseeable, but usually when social classes are so isolated that the progress or the chances of escalating are very low. That's why these generations are tired, because for generations and generations, they've been stuck in the same class of medium income families or very low income families. Now, moving on. They were saying in their POI already how you're not guaranteed that you'll make a lot of money. Know how if opposition, the migrants in opposition know that they're already making a good amount of money, they don't have to move. This is a voluntary move. If you're already making a good amount of money, if you're a doctor and the prospects of your future and the country you're going to move to are not better, then you don't have to move. The only reason you move is because you're desperate, because you see there's no chance of improving the conditions for your family, because the state has failed to provide you with such conditions, and you're the only one with the capacity to change that for the future generations. That is your family. You don't have to make a lot of money. Also note that they're saying that, oh, you won't make a lot of money in this kind of works, like with having these kind of jobs, but you'll probably make a good decent amount to send back home, just because the value of the currency in these countries is so different that what a minimum European minimum wage can do when sent to Latin America can make a great change in the difference, like in the life of the people that's receiving this money, as the info slide tells you, that it's actually going to change the possibilities of their education actually improving. Now, moving on. Going back to the natural, how like individuals don't have a compromise with the state. This is the sense of failure and hopelessness that I was talking to you about. It is very important to understand that the state is the only one to able to change the education opportunities at a great scale, while individuals cannot. The moment they see that is not happening, while they have the chance to change the future for their kids and for their family, that's when it becomes not only legitimate, but individually provides you with a better feeling to actually move and to actually generate opportunities. Note that staying at home not only doesn't make you feel hopeless, but it makes you feel guilty, that having the opportunity to create some sort of opportunities for your kids, you're just condemning them to live the life you've lived. They were one in certainty, and they were talking that this is only built up on the illusion. Well, no. Telling you that if you move to the West, you're probably going to get a better wage, provides you with much more certainty that just thinking that you're non-developed or your developing country is sometime somehow going to evolve or progress at some point. That's the illusion these people have been living for ages. That's where the hopelessness comes from. That's where there's more uncertainty. Now, not only is this good for the individual itself, because it's as we explained, what happens within the individual is that they have the reward of actually not only improving the life of the ones they left back home, but actually the fact that it actually brings progress to the community. The moment one person from a low-income neighborhood starts changing the education, that changes the life of the ones that are around them, because it's that person starts having relationships with persons, like with people from other social backgrounds, because it suddenly provides you with better orientation or guidance or of what's important to learn. My sister, she goes to a great school where she's actually conscious of the importance of me learning English. She might be able to help me even if I'm not the one go into the States, go into those greater institutions, especially when there's a background of poverty or where there's a background of development, where the sense of community is really, really strong. And these people, especially seeing that their parents are willing to sacrifice their comfort and their family to help them, are willing to be wanting to give back to their community at some point, even if it's not while they're being educated, as I told you before, through integrating them into different social circles and all of that. Maybe in the future, by giving back to them, or by investing and creating opportunities in those areas. So note how whereas opposition faces a zero promise of progress in the future whatsoever, we do create opportunities not only for that person, but for the community to actually progress. Now, closing, do you have any POI? Okay, now, note how, going back to our case, we've explained how the feeling is better for the individuals and how the progress is better off for the community as a whole. But now, engaging with what they were saying, in terms of the illusion, note how nowadays it is very likely that these people can research on the internet what the places that it's better to go to. They can have contact with people who have already migrated to these countries and learn and search for whatever the best opportunity is. And it is not the American dream is in the 60s, because now these people have resources to check where they're going to be better. Now, we trade off that these people might get to the point where they're willing to sacrifice things that they were not able to sacrifice before, maybe doing a job that they don't like, or maybe working for a little more amount of hours. But know that this is volunteer, especially given that they're probably traveling or moving to Western countries where the labor framework is pretty advanced. It is unlikely that they're going to be hardcore exploited. because those laws are even available for non-citizens. That's not a requirement. But now, lastly, in terms of like how there's education is not required for so many things, and people can still progress. Know that again, coming back to the desperation, the moment these people are willing to move is because they don't want their children to have the same opportunities they have. The only way to escalate in those countries is through changing the people you surround yourself with which your school provides you an opportunity with, changing your education and therefore accessing more opportunities, or the sheer opportunity of traveling to the West. That's where the change comes, where with the uncomfort of these people staying or having the same lives they want to have, and the responsibility and guilt of being or not being able to provide their children with such opportunity. Thank you.
Right. I thank the DPM for a great speech, and I will remind you all that POIs are an important part of the game, and I expect you to offer POIs and to take them as well. And to continue opposition side and sum up the first half of the debate, happy to call DLO. Here.
Hey, I just want to make sure that you can hear me.
Yes, you're audible.
All right, I'm going to turn on my camera for the first time in this tournament because we are not debating at 3 a.m. Let me just set up my timer. And in the meantime, I really want to say thank you to Andres. As I said before, honestly, waking up at 3 a.m. to debate is only worth it because of you. So thanks for coming here with me. And thanks to Juanita, and Diego would be here if he could, but he's judging right now. And thanks to Juanis, thanks for coming. And thanks to Adrian that has come into all my rounds. All right, so give me just 1 sec and I'll begin. All right, I'll be starting in 3, 2, 1, now. I'm going to talk about 2 things on this speech. Firstly, I'm going to clarify the type of people that is migrating and why they're doing it in order to not be framed out from the rest of the debate. And secondly, I'm going to explain our case that it is very simple. Let's go ahead. Look, panel, the idea that I want you to obtain from our case is that the short-term suffering of a migrant is first insufficient, but also ineffective, and that they can be good enough in their origin countries. And for that, we are very proud to oppose. Let's talk about the type of migrant that we are talking about. Already, Andres already framed out the type of people that are desperate, right? For example, refugees that are going to migrate anyway and not because of education or work or something like that. And also the most poor people, because these people, for example, live day to day, they have no more in for even travel out of their countries. These people will leave their family abandoned without even need. I think those people don't even have the option to migrate on the first place. We're talking about middle class people, and let's talk about the reasons why these people is very likely to migrate. Look, first, we already said the narrative, right? That makes you believe that you're better, that you will be better in another country because the countries the things in your country are very fucked up. But secondly, because we tend to demeritate our local conditions. We always see people in the USA, in Canada, living much better than us, and that makes us think that we will be better if we go to there, and that this creates the idea that I live really bad in my country, even when I don't. But thirdly, because the capitalism make me believe that I need more things, right? They make me believe that the more I have, the better. And this narrative go inside of the head of these people, and they start thinking that they need like a high class lifestyle and all of things like that in order to be good and fill out their duties, when this is not true. The opposition said, oh, but they are good. Why, like, they feel stagnant? Yes, they feel stagnant, and probably they are, but they are good enough in those middle class countries. They are not dying of starving or something like that. They are good enough in those countries, but they feel like they can be better, and they accept those exploitation conditions in order to have those high class lifestyle that they absolutely don't need. This is the type of people that we're talking about. But secondly, look, let's talking about why this is absolutely ineffective, and I'm going to directly engage with the case in the opening government. The first is I would like to say this is in the case of the opening government, this is not proof why this is going to be effective to raise the social scale of your family. You need to understand why this is sufficient, why this is enough, why they migrate successfully, and I think the opening government hasn't proved that. But even if the closing does, I'm going to explain why this is insufficient first, but secondly ineffective in order to raise the social scale of your family. Firstly, we understand that you probably will have a bit of more money in their side of the house. Yes, probably you have your salary on dollars or things like that, but you have still enough money in our side of the house. This proves that the amount of money that they obtain is like just a bit higher of what they have in their origin country. I don't think that the delta is so high. But secondly, even if you have a lot of money and the panel buys that, we think that this is non-sustainable for two reasons. Firstly, because you tend to spend this on immediate needs, as for example, buying a TV, buying a better house, and we think that's bad because that doesn't actually scale the social mobility of your family. But secondly, in terms of education, we think that this is insufficient, and I'm going to rebuild our case in here. We think that this is ineffective for two reasons. Firstly, because it is very unlikely that you can live and have a better job in the future for many reasons. Firstly, because it is very difficult to get into those countries, but secondly, because as Andres said, the price of living there is very, very high. But lastly, because the education in the developing countries tends to be not enough to get a good job in a developed country. That implies that with my education in Colombia, I don't have the ability to go to a good job in the United States. It is very unlikely that I can migrate and get what I want. But even they're going to say like, but they can stay in their countries and probably get a better conditions. We think that this is not enough for many reasons. Firstly, because you will still be seen as a failure. You like fight a lot, you send your dad to the United States to suffer a lot for nothing, and you will be seen as a failure, and this will be very hard to the families. This will harm the families because their family links are broken, but also because there are a lot of pressure on the children in order to just migrate successfully, and probably they are not going to do that. But lastly, because the labor market in those countries is not prepared for high skill positions. Probably they are not going to get a job because those jobs are given in the developing countries, for example, for things as clientelism or corruption. It is very unlikely that they have the ability to just, with education, scale their lifestyle even in the developing countries. We think that this is insufficient. Look at the conclusion of this argument, of this rebuttal as a whole, is that you did all for nothing. And we have two things here. But before I go to the impacts, I'd like closing if they have.
Yes, we're going to explain to you why the amount is going to be meaningful and why it's going to help tremendously to the origin countries of those immigrants.
Well, in order to do that, you have to engage with the reason that I just gave, that only with education from a developing country is not enough to go to the United States and have a good skilled job. It is not enough. But even if you stay in your country, you want to skill your lifestyle, because it is very difficult to obtain a very good job in a labor market that is not prepared for that. It is very insufficient. You have to engage with that, and you have to break all the prevention that I already did. Look, the conclusion of this is twofold. The first one is that you did all for nothing. And we think that this is very bad in principles. Because look, opening government says, oh, this is not about exploitation. Yes, we're not talking about exploitation. We're talking about things that are, for example, a job that is very physically demanded, working long hours or take more shifts in order to have more money, like being far away of your family, xenophobic narratives, and all of those things are fucking illegal, and this person is suffering a lot. We think that in principles this is wrong, because this takes out the human dignity of this person. This person is used as a means for an end, and we think that is very bad in principles. But secondly, look at in consequences. It is very unlikely that your family get the level of social mobility that you said, and it was literally all for nothing. And even if they have like an amount of social mobility, it is very, very slow. We think that this is not good in consequences. This is not worth it in consequences, but also this is not worth it in principles. The last thing I would like to say is that we stand that these people will be good enough in their country, in their origin countries, for all the reasons that we already said, because those countries have been growing, because with technical education you are good enough to stay in there, to have an enough income to live in a middle class people. because education in those countries is not necessarily enough to rise in the social scale, and this person still have like a good enough quality of life. In order for an opposition team, for a government team to win us on that, they have to engage with all those reasons, because we have proven effectively that these people will live good enough in their countries, and they don't have the need to go abroad and suffer a lot in order to save their families from nothing. For that reasons, I am very, very proud of us.
All right, I want to thank Yellow for a great speech and all the first half for what was a great debate so far. And to open up the second half of the debate, happy to call the member of government. Here.
Okay.
Hi, before you guys move forward, can you give me a minute? I just need to switch my internet. That's okay.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Yeah,
Let's
just give me a
take a
minute. Yep.
Okay. Hey, have your internet is on?
Yeah,
Okay,
good to go.
great.
Thanks.
Wonderful.
Amazing.
And even under 1 minute. Okay, member of government.
Okay, yeah, just a second before I would start, I would like to say like few thanks first to Roy Schulman for being a great coach in the last 2 years, to Guy Wolff, our amazing assistant coach, and lastly for Hamas for agreeing on a ceasefire in the last 2 days, so I will not need to go to a shelter during any of my speeches. Thank you all. Now I will start. Okay, 3, 2, 1, go. Yeah, we think that the most crucial point, like group in this debate, are the people who are already in the origin country, which are usually quite poor and actually need money which are getting into the country and better industry for the future. We think that are usually the actually most unprivileged people, because the ones that are flying out are usually people which have like more money to begin with, because they're able to save enough money to actually get this ticket and get those permissions, etc. Rather than that, we just add give a significant more mechanization of how they are getting are the situation getting better. Before that, 2 external rebuttals to this whole idea that those immigrants will not be able to get money. 3 responses. First of all, note that those people are actually flying usually by themselves. It means that they need to spend significantly less money. They can actually rent a room without an apartment and pay only let's say 20% because they have few roommates. They have significantly more time to work. They don't need to pay for kids. They can work 10 hours a day because they don't need to take care of them. All of this means they can get significantly more money than a regular immigrant, which usually even them can live there, so they can save a lot. We think that thirdly, usually those people just have a lot of motivation to do that. They really care about their kids, so they will work a lot. About this whole point, this decision will not be rational. 2 other responses. First of all, we think that those people know lots of other immigrants that's been there. They can speak with them. They can do Zoom talks and actually hear what they experience. They have a lot of time to decide why they save the money. So they will probably make a rational decision based on their own values, or will actually make them happy. To our extension. So 2 very strong reasons why the origin country is going to get into a significantly better situation on our side of the house. First of all, and this is crucial, note that many of the kids that I am going to educate in order to move abroad are just not going to move abroad. This is extremely crucial. We think that in many of those places, let's say India, there are just not enough people who can be doctors. If I am spending, if this is my only way to actually send my kid into a good academy, to a good elementary school, so that he will not be forced to work during all of his childhood in order to actually sustain his own family, we think that this is extremely crucial. And even if his parents is going to probably tell him, I would like you to be a doctor and work abroad, he doesn't have to listen to him. At the moment he actually turned into 21, when he finished to study, there's going to be a lot of other things that he will take in mind. Maybe he will already be married. Maybe in many of those places he will already have planned like a kid, and he will not like to move him to another country. Maybe he will be married, and it's just his like, let's say his or her like spouse will not want to move. Maybe he'll just feel that this is his home and he doesn't want to move. All of those things are extremely crucial. But secondly, know that even if he will move for a few years abroad, all of the mechanization that will got from like whether like high expenses in other country, the fact that maybe he will like the fact that he will be missing his old home, the fact that he will miss to speak in his own language, means that he's very likely to come back. This is even better, because then he will probably come back with a lot of crucial experience after he worked in Canada for a few years as a doctor. Then we think he's very likely to be able to do extremely crucial things. Why this is so helpful to this country? First of all, the fact that you have more doctors is literally more life you can save. The fact that you have like now more like good engineers that coming back to the country means that you have more people who can open new businesses, can actually give money to like that can buy more local products from people there, can and actually fund the country, give more taxation. All of those things mean that the country is very likely to develop and get a lot. This means that if before, let's say many of the, I don't know, owner of shops or restaurants didn't have much clients, on our side of the house, we just think we will have significantly more, and it's just more money that flow in the system. But we think that this is even stronger in case that he's going to stay there for several years. If this person is going to, I don't know, his kid is going to be in Canada for 20 years, and then one of his kids will like to go back to his origin, or will just be homesick, and when he's like 60, when he's in pension, he would like to come back. Then you have this person with a lot of money, which really can create a lot of like new jobs and things which are great. We think that up to now, rather than that, we think that this creates new role models for new kids there, which see people which are actually educated, and those people, when they come back rich, are very likely to put a lot of money to charity, because they actually feel the pain and like the hardship that all of their people from their hometown suffer. This means that this one, let's say, doctor can now give in the future education for few tens of kids, or I don't know, few other kids in his like far family or community. But second, we think there is just a large flow of foreign money, which is generally a good thing. We think that exactly because of all of the mechanization that I gave in the beginning, those people are likely to save significantly more money than all want you to think, because they don't need to spend any money in their country. Let's say that many of them choose works that doesn't require to spend money at all. Let's say someone who like take care of their old people. He literally live in their house. He's considered as working all day, and he doesn't even need to pay for his own food. All of this means that he can send like money of a very like serious salary to all of his family. And this means that a lot of people can actually enjoy it. Before I continue, I'll take CO extension.
How do you think that the family who is left behind feels and is going to function?
I think that they are firstly going to be quite proud of their like father. We think that they are going to be able to give a lot of money to their like more far family, let's say to their cousins, grandma, whatever. Yeah, I think it's enough. Jessica will answer for more. Okay, how there is going to be a lot of flow of money to the country. Secondly, charity. When this person himself is likely to do to like give money to other poor people in his community, and he has several ways to do that. First of all, he can just put like tell to his like richer friend in this country, his employer, his like people that he knows is from America, about hardships of people which are close to him, and they are very likely to put significantly more empathy to them, because they actually can imagine them. They know someone who is close to them, and they are very likely to actually bring significantly more money that way. We think that that he just have a bridge to and he can do that by himself. We think that this is the most crucial thing in this debate, because actually the people which are moving them are not that poor. Okay, most people in like third world countries cannot save thousands of dollars. They cannot save any money because they're living from a month to month without any savings. If they're slightly more privileged people were able to go, it would be great.
All right, I want to thank Member of Government for a great speech, and to open closing opposition side, happy to call the Member of Opposition. Here.
Hello? Hello? Am I visible? Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, give me just a few seconds to set up. Okay, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. I have tremendous respect for single parents, and that is because with all of the things that they have to do, when they have to do it on their own, to cook, to clean, to educate the children, they still succeed and make something out of these children. But the thing is that my respect corresponds to the fact that this is so difficult, and I do not want anyone to live in this kind of a state. What we're going to bring you in extension is first what the life of this person who is going abroad looks like, but secondly, what does this mean for the family who is left behind to fend on their own. First of all, let's introduce a big framing. That is about why this cannot work today and why this is not a Berlin Wall 89 situation like the OG tells you. The thing is that you have had huge migration waves happening recently, talking historically. First, we are talking about the Middle Eastern people migrating to Europe because of a lot of instability historically. Secondly, we have had a lot of Eastern Europeans and Balkans migrating further into the European Union. Thirdly, talking about Mexico, we have Mexicans migrating, and a lot of people are doing it even illegally. But fourthly, we have had even more recent conflicts that have been happening, for example, Ukraine, which have already introduced more of this instability. What does this framing, when proven like this, prove to you? First of all, that there is already a huge amount of immigrants accepted, which is first of all bad for competition. But secondly, we're going to explain how this comes about to an anti-immigration politics and sentiment. Panel, please note, the OO assumes that this is happening, but never explains why this is the case. Our analysis explained this, but I'm going to move into it further. First of all, because this moves the expensive housing to be even more expensive, because there is not enough housing. It is hard to build it for a short period of time, and also a lot of people are against it because this actually, for the house owners, lowers the price of their own owning house. Secondarily, it is a lot of the times the politicians do not integrate these people well, and they do not know the language, meaning that a lot of the times you have enclaves and you have bad integration happening. But thirdly, because this is a problem that is happening globally, and you can see it as something that is somewhat true on the media, you have a lot of fear mongering from the right-wing people in blaming. This is why you actually have all of these political problems. What does OG tell us to this? First of all, there is going to be like the only thing they say is there's going to be demographic change, but this is going to maybe affect the next generation. What is crucial, it is currently the people are not thinking that long-termly. They're thinking about saving themselves, and this is why when you have no housing built, they're actually going to focus on themselves and their politics anti-immigration. But secondly, you have automation that is also functioning parallel to this, so we are not sure if this is going to be better in the future, but currently what is sure is that it is bad. What does this framing prove to you? First of all, for the people who go, that you're most likely going to have bad conditions because there is no political support for the workers' rights, as OG just assumes. But secondly, there is going to be migration discrimination. And thirdly, that these people won't be able to make a lot of money. But secondarily, this also proves that the family has a much larger burden to come because the education is no longer a guarantee to enter because they're not letting people in. Moving into then the first extension from this framing, and that is, what does this person who chooses to go in their life look like? First of all, as I've explained, a lot of people are competing for your job. What does this mean from your perspective when you want to help the family? This means that you are going in and working overtime, like 10 to 12 hours. It is a race to the bottom with all of the other people who want to do the same and help their family to progress up these lines. But secondly, the job, you need to understand, no one told you this up until now in the debate. We're talking about manual labor, about mining, about construction, about maintenance. We're talking about you working months on end in these jobs. This literally breaks down your body physically. But thirdly, we're talking about you wanting to help. So you are saving up money and living very cheaply, meaning you're living in bad conditions with 5 to 10 people with bad hygiene. You cannot rest and recover, and you do not have your peace of mind. You're eating low quality food because you do not have the time or the knowledge to cook, to prepare, or the money to actually buy it. What does all of this mean? You're first of all living terribly as a person. You're broken down day by day. But secondarily, you aren't able to sustain this kind of a life. You cannot cannot succeed because of your health deteriorating, but also you're fighting younger workers and younger generations that are coming in the future. What does this mean? You do not gain any of the benefits of gov that proposes because you're fighting against these younger people, because you're deteriorating away in these conditions with a lot of competition, but you get all of these harms for the person. What is the comparative? The comparative is they stay at home, first of all, where there is no immigration competition, but secondarily, you have a lot of family, a lot of friends, a lot of connections. So even if your job at home isn't the best, you can actually do something good. Moving then into the second extension, and what does this mean for the family? You need to understand when your husband goes into this kind of a situation, you're fearing for the person, you don't see them, you're thinking about the worst possible conditions and situations that could have happened. But secondarily and crucially, you do not have this person by your side. We're talking about people who are usually going when their children are young to provide them for a future. What does this mean? No help with raising these children, no help with educating them, no help with working around the home, no help when your family is distressed, when there is something bad happening. And this is crucial, panel, because this all works no matter what your situation is, whether you're poor, but especially even worse when you're poor and you're letting someone stay at home in a bad situation with 2 children, when you cannot actually, be able to solve all of these things. But thirdly, talking about the children, they also feel guilty. The whole family feels guilty in these situations because they are actually thinking that their father is doing this for them. But fourthly, panel, you're over time getting more and more distance between each other. First of all, romantically, because you need someone in hard times. This is why people usually are more likely to cheat. For example, when in the USA, when the military is off doing their things. But secondarily, I mean, this is very important. This is like ruining relationships. But secondarily, you're culturally living in different traditions. And lastly and thirdly, you're building separate lives. You're living with different friends. You're living in different homes. You're living with different family. Your children are getting jobs. Your children getting girlfriends that you have never seen, girlfriends and boyfriends. What does this mean? That these people that are your family do not want to go most likely after the 5 years that you have worked or the 10 years, but secondarily that your relationship is no longer as strong as it has been before. What is the impact of this? The huge impact that I was talking about. The emotional instability and the pain that the family goes through on both sides. The raising of the children, which is going to be much worse in their education. How do you panel weigh this up? First of all of these impacts are irreversible. You cannot educate your children when they're young twice. But secondarily, this is huge intensity of impacts, the largest intensity anyone has brought. But lastly, uncertainty. First of all, we do not depend on characterization and whether we are talking about the middle class or not. Our impacts and our arguments work on everyone. But secondarily, we tell you that the government side, first of all, never proved why these people would want to go, but secondarily, why they can go in either case. This is why you have to vote for closing opposition. Thank you.
All right. I want to thank the member of opposition for a very fine speech and to continue this debate on some of government side. Happy to call the government with. Here.
I heard it's trendy to say thank you in those panels, but I would not like to say thank you. I already started this final speech of that, and I would like to remind myself and everyone that the people who are not in these panels are great debaters. The fact that you had one bad competition doesn't mean anything about you as a debater. You're a great community, you're doing great speeches, and I really like to be here. And now let's do this. 3, 2, 1. 2 main clashes in this debate. The first is the immigrants, the second is the effect on the origin country. Roik clearly wins the clash about the debate about the origin country, but please notice that he also wins the immigrants when he comes and explains why this is going to be a rational decision that the immigrants makes after he gets all of the information of how his conditions are going to look like. But before we dive into this, let's take Ciolo. Ciolo comes and talks to me about the illegal immigrants of Ukraine. I have no fucking idea what they have to do with this debate. This debate is about the people who are migrating because of this specific policy. What does it mean? They migrated legally. This means that there are countries with charges of workers in specific field, and they're saying if you want to migrate to us legally, and we do not have enough people in those areas to move forward our economy, you can come. We do not think that those are the people who are the tipping point for the anti-migration ideas that CEO tries to push. And if you want to and if CEO wants to debate about the poor people of Ukraine, they can be my guest. Those are not the people who this debate is about. Please notice that when those workers come into a jobs where shortage, there's no xenophobia because they actually fueling up the economy of those people, which means those people are usually grateful to them. But moreover, the more immigrants you have in your country, the more contact you have with them, and the more shattering stereotypes they have. Their second point about the family, about the traffic condition, please note that they completely ignore Roy's analysis about why you're going to make a rational decision, why you're going to talk via WhatsApp, via Zoom to people who are already immigrated, why are you going to ask them how many hours they work, how rest is it, how good is your salary. And if after that you still decide to migrate, it means that the conditions in your country are worse. It means that you have longer hours there. It means that you have a smaller salary. It means maybe that your country has sweatshirt. And specifically, this analysis of Wolff shows you why the conditions are inherently going to be better because you have the full information. Please note that this also flips the idea of family, because if you work longer hours in your country, if you're making less money and you see your children going hungry and asking why you're not helping, you're going to feel much worse. On the comparative, when you live and work, you have Skype, you have Zoom, you can ask them how they're doing. Those people, those things do not cost a lot of money. Let's go into the clashes and show why Roy won them. One of the most important clash is the origin country. Roy already showed you why the immigrants who are coming to this country are already more privileged because they have better security network because they immigrate legally, and those places have better human conditions on the comparative of the people. But please notice that in those origin countries, there's simply more people. Most of the people are not going to migrate. Most of the people are going to stay in their origin country. So the problem, when we're showing you that the lives are going to be better, we're showing you impact on most people. What do we get here from OO, and why is Roy analysis is critical? All comes and tells us, listen, they're selling them some dream, and they're not going to make the money that OG wants there. This analysis is logically prior to everything OG tells you about how they're going to send money back or how it's going to create opportunities because they explain to you why they're never going to get their links. Only when OE comes here and explain to you why they're going to have this information, why the fact that there's a big community that they can talk to means they can compare the conditions. Only then you get OG's ideas. But even more, I think that the way gave you much better analysis on this clash. He explains to you if a position is correct and they're getting more money, but they're not immigrating, they're still getting education in their countries, which means that those countries have more professionals that there's a shortage of. That it means that instead of focusing on surviving, I can go again and get maybe worse education as a doctor in India. But in the last sense, India is getting more professionals. Moreover, we understood that even if they're migrating because of opposition analysis of they're getting homesick, they're going to get education in other European countries and they're going to go home and move up the market. This analysis is already more specific and connected to the motion that it's going to create some opportunities of educated people that you got from opening government, and he gives you a much deeper analysis here. Before I continue, I would like to take opening. Yes.
In order to win, government teams needs to weigh why these people needs to migrate in terrible conditions just to have more money when we already proved they are good enough in their origin countries.
But you yourself said that they're going to have horrible lives. CEO agrees with it. We think that their main motivation to migrate is when they're weighted the condition, and they said that this is crucial for their children's education. We're not saying those are the poorest people. We're saying those are the people who makes their rational decision that they need to leave their family back in order for them to have a better life. And why this decision is rational, you get only from us. But please notice that even on the clash of where you're getting more money, Roy wins. Because he explained to you why it's very, very likely that because I'm homesick, because I feel guilty that I will send money back. But moreover, he gives you a much more stronger mechanism. But why, when I meet rich people in my new origin country and they see my pain and they hear about my children, it's much more likely I will convince them to send more money. Those giving you tens, if not hundreds, more people investing back in this country, thus giving them better working condition, giving them the taxes to make better security networks, and giving those people basic rights. In conclusion, Ray showed you why the life of the immigrants are going to be better. Ray showed you why it's going to be better for origin countries. Ray already showed you why it's going to be better for the European countries that need these workers. For all that reasons, please.
I want to thank Government Whip for a very fine speech, and to close this debate from opposition side and as a whole, I'm happy to call the opposition whip. Hear, hear.
Fine. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
I'm starting in a few seconds. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Panel note that every team in this debate is ignoring how this process of like going abroad and working looks for you and your family. We are the only team in this debate that brought you this crucial explanation. Everyone else is just assuming there is some free money flow to your family. You're having a nice time, they're having a nice time, everyone's happy. Like basically we want to rebut this, and like we say that is not true. We agree, motivation of the person going is high, but the opportunities are not. Like basically that is why it will be terrible for them. CG had 2 responses for our case. First is like, oh, these people will make a rational decisions, please, like, and they will know working conditions. 2 responses here. First, this decision cannot be rational because they do not know what will will they see and what will happen to them over there. So basically they don't have epistemic access, if you will, to make that decision and to basically know how to decide in this situation. But also, like basically they have this high motivation build up, like they needed to have very high determination to go there. So basically to go there and say, oh, I don't really like that, and come back when they saved for a prolonged period of time is really unlikely to happen. So these are the reasons why probably they are not able to make that a rational decision in a vacuum. But second of all, on being illegal, like CG is telling, oh, it's only for people that are going abroad legally. First of all, from like Eastern European country, you can only stay in the Western country for up to 3 months, and then you need to come back and then stay for 3 months and then to come back, blah blah blah. So basically what's happening in this, basically you if you are only considering legal immigrants, basically you cannot achieve that amount of money that you need for you to unlock your benefits, and basically nowadays it's extremely hard for people to get citizenship from the Western Europe because of the high immigration in the past. But please panel notice that all both government teams are dependent on the presumption that there will be sufficient and really large amount of money that these individuals will be able to send back home. And basically we will explain to you why it's not the case, and if they don't have enough money to send, basically, then none of their impacts are standing. So first of all, this works whether they are legal or not. Please notice, first of all, these are blue collar jobs stated in the info slide, meaning that by the virtue of motion, this is basically something that is lower paying. Second of all, my partner talked to you about the competition. There are a lot of immigrants, there are a lot of people escaping the war, escaping poverty, and basically they are racing to the bottom in order to achieve to find better life, and they're really prepared to work for way less money than it was basically 10, 20, 30 years ago, when it was decent amount of money for you to go and work. Third of all, like, we are entering recessions. It is becoming better, worse and worse for everyone. So basically, there is a high likelihood that they can lose job. It's not sustainable. Fourthly, it's a really high cost of living, because InfoSlide is like presuming Western countries, Western Europe, states, Canada, etc. So basically, especially if you're coming from some border country, this is extremely expensive for you to do basic standard of living, like basically only to pay for your accommodation and to pay for your food expenses. And we say for all these reasons, basically it will not be some extreme sufficient amount of money that you can go and have all these benefits that they are claiming. But even if you do have benefits, please notice, panel, that our extension is not contingent. First, it's not contingent on characterization of opening teams, like whether poor people will go, middle class people will go. We don't care for all for both cases. Like, our extension stands. But second of all, it's not contingent whether or not it will succeed. Even if these people achieve really large amount of money, all the destruction, all the individual harms for the person that is going and for the family are staying, and that is what my partner talked to you about. So let me remind you to our extension. First, terrible for people that are going, that have this large pressure and push to save money as much as possible, that are working 12 to 15 hours a day, that are destroying their health, that are away from their family, that have basically no social life because they feel guilty if they're spending additional money rather than sending it home. But second of all, for family that they are leaving behind, basically that is missing you, that basically you're growing up apart from, and also that feels a guilt and pressure because you are over there sacrificing for them. We think, panel, this is terrible. Before I do a more rebuttal, let's take opening.
Sure. It's the hope for a better future versus the hopelessness they have back home that makes them willing to sacrifice the integration actively. At this point, these people are not migrating to have a great time, just to improve the chances for their kids. Why is this not enough?
Yes, but I already answered to that. I already explained to you why there will not be sufficient amount of money to achieve your benefits. But let's rebut CG. CG has 3 steps in their case to unlock their benefits, and we will break each one of them. First of all, they say there will be a lot of money you send. We already rebutted that with extreme costs of living and everything I said. Second of all, they say that people will come back and then improve standards of living in their community when they're educated. We say that's not likely. They never explain why they will not, first, never explain why they will want to go to the West, but rather if they go, why will they want to come back? We say it's not likely. They will much more likely integrate, build life over there and basically stay there. But lastly, on charity, we don't see why it's crucially for this group that will that have incentive to pay for charity. They will rather spend it on themselves, on their children, etc. So we directly clash with OG, with how this is worse for individual, how this is in worse community. And lastly, state forcing you to change something will not happen if there is not enough political pressure and flow of money into your country. And we already explained to you why there is not enough money. Our impacts are irreversible, no matter of whether or not you're achieving better life. They have huge intensity, and they're the most certain thing that will happen in this debate, regardless of any other outcomes. Please, panel, vote CO.
All right, I want to thank everyone for a great debate, and if you can open your cameras and give us a round of applause for everyone that reached so far and that has been in the final. Well done, everyone. So now if you I'll close the recording.